Is it time for Britain to leave the European Court of Human Rights, or indeed the Convention, in a quest to stop the boats?
Well, here to debate this is human rights campaigner and activist Peter Tatchell, who supports the echr, and former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib, who wants out. Very good morning to you both. Fantastic to have your company. Ben Habib, let's start with you. Why do you want out?
Well, I would want out of the echr, irrespective of what's happening in the Channel. It's served its purpose. The European Convention of Human Rights and the court which is attached to it was established in large part by the United Kingdom at a time when Europe had just come out of a world war, and it was done in order, in effect, to control rogue European countries. We've got to call out the motive absolutely clearly. The United Kingdom was only part of it because it established it in order to bring some kind of human rights level playing field to Europe, which had been sadly lacking for during the war and many years before that. And it has served its purpose. It's got 16 principles. The judges who are appointed to the court basically are unaccountable. They've made up laws as they go along. They famously, as you might recall, declined to allow us to deport Abu Qatada in 2012. They stripped us of the ability to prevent prisoners from having the vote. And they've made lots of laws, as it were, on the hoof. Now, judges and courts shouldn't be making laws. They should simply be adjudicating on them. And the European Convention of Human Rights has allowed this court to be completely out of hand. And of course, the crossing of the Channel is very topical and very visual, and so we all kind of focus on it right now. But actually, there needs to be more joined up and consistent approach to it from the government. And we should simply leave the European Court of Human Rights, the European Convention. In fact, the convention should be abolished. The 46 countries that are members, half of them are already members of the European Union. The other half are regarded as perfectly sensible countries.
Well, Ben, let me bring in Peter Tatchell here. Because, Peter, what do you make of Ben Habib's argument that this was a convention drawn up to stop another Nazi Germany, and the United Kingdom's nowhere close to that?
Well, first let me say that withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights will not stop the small boats. That will happen regardless. We need to reform immigration and asylum policy. That's the way to go, not pulling out of a very important human rights convention, which was set up not just to ensure that there was no further revival of Nazism, but to ensure that all citizens across Europe have protections against authoritarian governments. This convention enshrines fundamental human rights to protect you and me against abusive government that goes against the law. Now, the European Court of Human Rights has not invented new laws. It's interpreted the law as the law is written. And in many cases, it has done so to the benefit of citizens. So, for example, it's had rulings against harassment, to protect people against harassment. It's had rulings against government and police spying on private, innocent citizens. That protects us from intrusive government. And I think that's a very, very good thing. We should be very, very careful about pulling out from a convention that enshrines the rule of law. It's a way of holding governments to account to ensure they do not violate law. It's a last stop measure for people in Europe to protect their fundamental rights. And of course, in cases where the ruling is against the government, that is precisely because the government has acted against the law. And we need a check and balance on government. Just because the government's elected doesn't give it a carte blanche to do whatever it wants. We as citizens need that protection against autocratic, high-handed government.
OK, Ben Habib, I want to give you a chance to come back to some of those points, that this protects the individuals from the state, that it allows the government to be held to account, that we need those checks and balances. What do you have to say to that?
None of the member states of the European Convention have dictatorial, totalitarian governments that are abusing human rights. None of them. And one of the best adherents, the establisher of human rights across the globe, was effectively the United Kingdom. The notion that if we were to leave the convention, somehow the protection of our individual human rights in the United Kingdom would be diluted in some way, is a fundamentally flawed one. The European Court of Human Rights is yet another supranational body with unelected appointees to it, unaccountable appointees. It is fundamentally anti-democratic. It should be the British people that determine who our parliamentarians are, and they're the ones who should establish the law. And we have a democratic system which allows us to hold them to account. And so we do not need to be in it. It does make law up on the hoof, contrary to what Peter Tatchell said. It does make law up. It has 16 guiding principles, and it simply makes up the law as it sees fit around it. And a lot of the judgments it's issued without us even knowing which judge it was that issued them. It is a completely unnecessary law. And the other point I just make, the virtue signalling European Union has declined to join the European Convention because it recognizes that it wants the Court of Justice of the European Union, in its own view, to be the highest judicial body. And in the case of the United Kingdom, it should be the Supreme Court. We shouldn't be in the European Convention. There's no need for us to be part of it. It's anti-democratic, and our Supreme Court should be the supreme judge of all issues in the United Kingdom.